Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 73 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to break down the AFC South. So we have almost completed our divisional previews. We have 2 more to go after today's show, and we're going to go through some buys, sells, sleepers, and breakouts for the AFC South as a whole. We're going to go through all 4 teams, break down every position, names and players that you need to know. We got some nice values for you for your dynasty leagues and some redraft tips as well that should help you with those leagues and your drafts coming up over the next couple weeks. So before we jump into today's episode, I want to remind everyone, as always, make sure you're following this podcast on your platform of choice. We are on everything out there, so Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. So go make sure you are following the show so you don't miss any future episodes. And find us on social media. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find our Facebook page or YouTube channel. It's all there. You can find me on social media as well at Andrew Vcourt, Twitter or X as well. And happy to answer any questions, take questions for the show, anything, start, sit, trade questions, the whole 9 yards, happy to discuss it. And one more thing before moving on into the Houston Texans, go download Fast Draft. It's a new fantasy best ball app. It's awesome. It's a really easy platform to use. And if you use code WARROOM when you download the app and deposit up to $50, Fast Draft is going to match that deposit. And all you got to do is play through one draft, and you'll get that deposit match. So you can end up with $100 to play with. There's all sorts of different draft contests, and the picks, it only takes 20 seconds per pick. So you can get through a draft nice and quick, and you can do them on the go anywhere you want. So I highly recommend you go check it out. That is Fast Draft, and use code WARROOM today. All right, so let's move into the AFC South division. We're going to go in alphabetical order as we have done so far throughout the summer, and to kick things off with the Houston Texans. And we're going to go through all the positions and give you their keep, trade, cut value for Dynasty right now, just so you get an idea of where these players are falling in line from the general consensus. Keep, trade, cut is not a perfect system, but it is something that certainly can give you a good idea of how the market as a whole is thinking about a player, and it can help you out with those trades and decision-making and that sort of thing. So I think it's a helpful tool. And so we're going to kick things off with the quarterback position. C.J. Stroud, of course, Ohio State quarterback, and he's the QB 10, number 26 player overall. He's backed up by Davis Mills. And C.J. Stroud is a player that the fantasy community had really high hopes for last season. In dynasty leagues, he was being taken as a top 5 pick. He was everyone had identified C.J. Stroud as the guy, that was going to be the next big thing because he had a really good rookie season. But unfortunately, the follow-up season was not as successful, struggled quite a bit. His receivers were getting banged up. The O-line wasn't very good. He simply struggled more as well. And so there's going to be a new offensive system in place, new coordinator, and a whole new group of wide receivers to join Nico Collins. So that's interesting. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And I think that C.J. Stroud as the QB 10 makes a whole lot more sense for Dynasty than where he was last year. I can understand why he was so highly valued. However, for me at the time, this time last year and earlier, even during startup season, I was telling everyone, hey, Jalen Hurts is still the guy that you should be taking over C.J. Stroud. That worked out to be the case. You need those guys that are going to be in the top 5 to have some kind of rushing upside, unless they're going to be just otherworldly quarterbacks that are throwing for 40 touchdown passes a season. And C.J. Stroud, while certainly has the potential, he's just not there yet. So I think QB 10, it's a much better spot to be, although I still wonder if that's a couple spots too high. I think he's probably going to settle in as someone that is a lower end QB1, high end QB2 on a year-to-year basis, which is certainly valuable. I think he's a good NFL quarterback, and he's going to have a job long term. At least it certainly appears that that's going to be the case. And that brings its own value as well. Getting that long-term contract. But I think there is some fear for me that he is going to end up being somebody that you would rather have as a QB2 in Dynasty than your QB1. But that remains to be seen. So QB10 I think is still fair for now. And he's got some nice receivers. The running back room is a bit banged up. So Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Woody Marks, Dameon Pierce make up the backfield for the Texans. And Joe Mixon checks in as the RB36 on Keep Trade Cut. He is the 152nd overall player. Nick Chubb, running back 74 and 271 overall. Woody Marks, though, running back 61 and 230 overall. Dameon Pierce still hanging around. He had a couple nice years, but he's down at RB83. So the running back room, I think, is really, really interesting because Joe Mixon is battling some injuries. We don't know exactly when he's going to return, if it's going to affect his start to the season. I think he's certainly going to miss preseason. And Nick Chubb, the reports are that, well, he looks like a guy that is old and coming off a major injury, which makes sense because that's exactly what he is. So I don't know that Nick Chubb is going to be much of anything for redraft or dynasty purposes. He might get, a few extra carries in the first couple weeks if Joe Mixon is not at full strength. But to me, this is a situation where, number one, the Texans are going to probably be airing the ball out. They're going to be throwing a lot with this running back group. And Woody Marks, I think, is the guy that I would like to have from a dynasty perspective at their current value because he's a receiving back. He's a rookie. He's on the older side for a rookie. But the team traded a future day 2 pick to acquire him. They traded a third-round pick to draft him this year in the 4th round. So the team obviously really likes him. I'm not that concerned about Dameon Pierce. And we've seen in Dynasty and in PPR leagues, the running back that's on the field for third downs and the 2-minute drills, they can really accumulate points rather quickly. So he's not going to be an early down grinder. He's not going to do, some of the stuff that Nick Chubb will be able to do on this offense, or even Dameon Pierce should Mixon and Chubb be banged up. Pierce will probably have an early down role. But this is going to be a more pass-heavy offense until Mixon is back. And then again, I think Joe Mixon, I was down on him, a couple months ago at his current price, but his value now with the injury has dropped to a point where I'm a little bit more comfortable with it. I think that while he's going to miss some time to start the year or be a little slow to get going, I think he's going to still provide you some value, and I'm not that worried about Nick Chubb. So potentially has dropped to the point where if you're a contender in a dynasty league, I don't know if you make that move now. Maybe you see how the beginning of the season goes, but you might be able to pick up Joe Mixon on the cheap if you are really struggling at the running back position. But Woody Marks is the guy that I'm interested in and excited about here, more so because I think he can give you that passing down work that could allow him to be a nice flex play or bye week guy at some point during the year. I don't know exactly when that will be, but I think there certainly is some potential. Now, the wide receivers, like I mentioned, very, very different group this year. So Nico Collins checking in at wide receiver 9 and number 20 overall. Jaden Higgins, the second-round rookie out of Iowa State, is the wide receiver 39 and player 100 overall. Jalen Knoll, his Iowa State teammate and now NFL teammate, also from Iowa State. Wide receiver 55, 163 overall. He's going to be more of a slot wide receiver. And then Christian Kirk, who they acquired this offseason, wide receiver 75 and number 214 overall. And then the forgotten man, Tank Dell, still on the team, of course, but he is going to miss likely the entire 2025 season, or at least most of it, due to the severe injury that he suffered last year. So he is wide receiver 70 and 198 overall, which I think is fine. Obviously he showed a lot of potential when he was healthy and when he did play. But with Higgins and Knoll coming in, even, a year or two from now when Tank Dell is hopefully back to full strength, it's hard to imagine what kind of role is going to be left for him, especially because the injury risk is still going to be really high. So I think at this point it's something where if you have him, you're probably just stashing him on IR and hoping for the best in a year or two. But he's not going to factor into 2025. To me, Nico Collins is in line for another great season. He's a locked and loaded, wide receiver 1, top 12 guy, both redraft and dynasty. And Higgins, I think, definitely has some potential. I would imagine he's going to be the starting, the other starting outside receiver, wide receiver 2 for this team, and he'll get some targets. And then Christian Kirk is going to be the starter in the slot, is what I'm expecting. So Jalen Noel will probably have to, bide his time, wait for an opportunity, and that could make Christian Kirk a sneaky value. CJ Stroud showed a good connection with Tank Dell, who was playing in the slot for the most part. And so Christian Kirk, he'll be in that role. It could work out to be a nice, very late, if in a redraft league, a late round pick, or more than likely a free agent pickup. I doubt he's being drafted, and a guy that you could flex if need be. But this is going to be Nico Collins. This is going to be his team, his wide receiver room. He's going to dominate the targets, the yards, touchdowns, you name it, and but Christian Kirk, some sneaky value. And then Jaden Higgins, some sneaky potential value as well. I know he was a second-round pick in rookie drafts, but I think in a way he's a little bit forgotten because there is the hype around some of those other rookie receivers that was going in the same range as him, whether it be a Luther Burden or a Matthew Golden, Trey Harris, that sort of thing. But Higgins, I think, has a ton of potential and could be a really, really solid number 2 receiver for this team. And as long as the O-line can stay healthy and be anything better than, one of the bottom 5 units in the league, like it probably is going to be, that'll help the offense. But, and that's, while I mentioned it, let's talk about that for a minute. Houston revamped their entire offensive line. It was not good last year. On paper, it looks arguably worse in 2025. So CJ Stroud is going to have to be able to protect himself. He's going to have to get the ball out fast. Again, Woody Marks in the passing game could be a nice bet. Christian Kirk in the slot. And it wouldn't shock me if this team struggles a bit, especially with the O-line, but also a new offensive system, new coordinator. It could be a few weeks before that really meshes. So I'm a little nervous about Houston, but still a lot of talented players on the offense, big-time fantasy names. So we'll see how that shakes out. And then at tight end, Dalton Schultz, Cade Stover. Schultz is tight end 33, 219 overall. Stover down at tight end 44. I'm not all that interested in Cade Stover in Dynasty. Dalton Schultz, though, I think is a perfectly capable backup Dynasty tight end. If you need somebody to plug in on a bye week, I think he's fine. He's capable. He's not going to blow you away, but if you need a guy that might be able to get you 10 points, he can be your guy. He's not going to do anything special, but he's serviceable. And depending on how quickly the rookie receivers come along, being a veteran in this offense, Schultz could get some targets. All right, so let's switch over to the Indianapolis Colts. And, what a nightmare at the quarterback position for Indianapolis. This time last year, I was very high on Anthony Richardson, as much of the market was. That turned out to be a bust in a big way. And now he finds himself in a quarterback battle with Daniel Jones. So it's, if you're a Colts fan, this has got to be, tough to watch, because Richardson goes out preseason game and, first series, he takes a huge hit, unblocked. Guy comes in. He should have gotten the ball out much, much faster. He didn't see it, didn't read it, and he gets hurt. So it's a hand injury, I believe, so a dislocated finger. And it sounds like he's going to be fine, back to practice and whatnot, and I don't think he's expected to miss any game time. But any time missed, even if it's just practice at this point, or if that affects him, because it is on his throwing hand, so if that affects him in any way, it's going to really hurt him in this quarterback competition. I think that it's clear Anthony Richardson has the upside of the two quarterbacks. We saw that a couple years ago. That's why there was so much hype. He can run. He's big, athletic. He can bomb the ball down the field. He just can't read defenses or throw the ball anything short of, a go route down the field. So if he can figure those things out, he could be great. But we just haven't seen it yet. From the mental side of the game, I just don't know if it's going to be there for him. So while I would love it from a fantasy perspective if he can figure things out and become a true NFL caliber passing quarterback, I just don't know that it's going to be the case. Although I do think that the Colts would like him to be the starter and would like him to win the job. I don't know that it's going to happen. Daniel Jones, while he is not good, is at least mediocre. He is capable. He's a much better passer than Anthony Richardson, and he can still run himself. So it's not like he's a total, statue back there or anything. He's had a couple nice seasons rushing the ball in the NFL. So I think Daniel Jones has the leg up to be the starter, but it's going to be rough no matter who it is at quarterback. I think from a fantasy perspective, Daniel Jones provides more for the other players on the team. The wide receivers are going to be in a much better position with Daniel Jones. And, unless your name is Alec Pierce, he's probably the only guy that's going to do better with Anthony Richardson because he's a pure deep threat only kind of receiver. But we'll see what happens. I think, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, the other big names in this offense, and now Tyler Warren, all would probably rather have Daniel Jones to help boost their numbers. So we'll see what happens, how it's going to shake out. I have my fingers crossed because I love a lot of the weapons on this team. I just don't know how this is going to play out. So I running back, mentioned Jonathan Taylor. He's the RB9 and number 49 player overall on Keep Trade Cut. DJ Giddens, the rookie, is going to back him up. He's running back 53. And Tyler Goodson and Khalil Herbert are there as well for depth. Goodson running back 96, Herbert running back 95. And it kind of seems like Tyler Goodson has a leg up on Herbert, and it's going to be more of Giddens and Goodson as the backups to Jonathan Taylor, and Herbert might not have a roster spot. So we'll see how that all plays out, but this is going to be Jonathan Taylor's backfield. He's still at a young enough age in Dynasty where, he can have 2 or 3 really great seasons left before he starts to decline, but he's also played long enough that I think you should keep an eye on it to where if he picks up another injury or, starts off a little slow and you're not a true contender, might be time to consider moving on. But for now, he should be ready to go. I think he's a really solid RB1. I don't know if he has RB1 overall potential anymore like he did a few seasons ago, but still a guy that can absolutely be number 1 on a week and, finish as a top 5 overall running back for the season. So do like Jonathan Taylor. At wide receiver, Michael Pittman. He is the wide receiver 51 after a down season with some injury issues. The 138th player overall on Keep Trade Cut. Josh Downs, the wide receiver 40 and 101 overall. And then I mentioned Alec Pierce, wide receiver 82. And then A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver 66. He is entering his second year in the league. And this comes down a bit to who's going to play quarterback. Because if Anthony Richardson is the QB, none of these guys are really going to be great for fantasy. Downs will be serviceable. Pierce is going to have the occasional, long touchdown that might make him a good, DFS type of play. But Michael Pittman is going to struggle if it's Anthony Richardson. He needs a better passing quarterback. So he is hoping for Daniel Jones. And I think Josh Downs is probably hoping for Daniel Jones too, because I think he's got a ton of potential this year. He's a really good slot receiver, and he's had some nice moments so far in the NFL, but he just needs better quarterback play to take the next step, which I think he can absolutely do. So he's a player that I'm really high on this offseason. I think he will has a very good chance to finish as the best fantasy wide receiver on this team. I'm expecting some semblance of a bounce back from Michael Pittman if it is Daniel Jones. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to reach the heights that he had a few seasons ago, but hopefully he can step up and be a bit more serviceable as at least a flex play than he certainly was last year. And then A.D. Mitchell, I was out on him last year as a rookie. He didn't do anything last year. I don't see it happening. Unless the quarterback play is just far exceeds my expectations. I just don't see it in the cards for him. I don't think that there is enough to go around to support Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Tyler Warren, Jonathan Taylor, and somebody like A.D. Mitchell. So I'm fine with moving on from him. I think there's a pocket of the internet has some hype for A.D. Mitchell, so I would see if you can find one of those guys in your league, but I highly doubt you're going to be able to get anything for him. Maybe a third, but I'm not buying him at this point. So, and then Tyler Warren. So we mentioned him. He is the new stud at tight end for this team. First round pick. He's the tight end 4 on Keep Trade Cut, the number 46 overall player, and tons and tons of potential with Tyler Warren. Comes in with a big tight end draft class this year in the first round between him and Colson Loveland, who I love both guys. And Warren, I think, is going to be a really important piece on this offense. He's going to play a lot. It's been a long time since the Colts have had a really good tight end. Probably going back to like the era with Peyton Manning at the quarterback position for them. And so the Colts would love if Tyler Warren lives up to his first round billing, his potential. And I think it's a situation where a year or two from now, if Tyler Warren is the number 1 target earner on this team, I don't think anyone would be surprised. He absolutely has that potential to be, in the same category as, a Trey McBride, a Sam Laporta, somebody like that that's just getting a ton of targets. I don't want to say Brock Bowers necessarily because that's a really high bar to live up to, but at least in terms of the importance to the offense, he could fall into that category. So we'll see what happens with that, but I'm excited about Tyler Warren. It wouldn't shock me if Tyler Warren has a bigger immediate impact than Colson Loveland, so I very much like the long-term outlook and the short-term outlook for Tyler Warren, and I would probably prefer him in redraft among the rookie tight ends. All right, so moving on over to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have had a pretty exciting offseason between, their big trade-up in the draft to get Travis Hunter, the running back competition that's going on right now. I got Trevor Lawrence coming back from injury, so some interesting storylines here for the Jags. At quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, QB 19 and player number 59 overall. He's backed up by Nick Mullins, who comes over from Minnesota. And at running back, Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, Bayshell Tootin, LaQuint Allen making up that room. And so we'll talk about the quarterbacks and the running backs before we get to the receivers here. So Bigsby, Etienne, Tootin, a 3-headed monster. We don't really know who's going to emerge. It's kind of a mess. Bigsby is the RB32 and player 141 overall. Etienne, RB35 and 147 overall. And then Tootin, RB41 and player 159 overall. And then LaQuint Allen, the other rookie on the team, checking in at RB86. So I hope that LaQuint Allen makes the team because I think he's a really fun receiving weapon, can probably play a bit of wide receiver. But in terms of the 3 main running backs, if you asked me this question 2 months ago, I would have said Tootin was going to be the guy. It kind of sounds like he's had a bit of a rough training camp, been injured, missed some practice time, fumbling still a bit of an issue for him. So I'm a little bit less excited about the possibility of him taking over in year 1 as the starter, but certainly should be in the mix at some point. And I still like him, overall and in 2026. But in terms of immediate fantasy value, it's really, really difficult to figure this out because you got Tank Bigsby, who seems like the guy in terms of the early down work. But ETN in their first preseason game got a ton of action with the starters, and it's just a mess. We're not really going to know how this is going to shake out until we get to the regular season. And it could be any of these guys. I would expect it to be either Bigsby or ETN that, is actually listed as the starter and plays the most in the first few weeks of the season. But we could just end up in a situation where it's a committee. Neither guy is super helpful for fantasy, and I'm not going to be surprised one bit if that happens. I will say, though, that one of these players is likely to be worth more than what their current value is, just because of the nature of the backfield and that's so ambiguous. Someone is going to end up being better than RB32. And I think my early leader in the clubhouse for that is probably Tank Bigsby. But it could very well be either of the other two. It could be ETN. He's more of the speed guy, whereas Bigsby is a bit more of an early down back, power running back. And then Tootin is also a speed guy, can also catch the ball. So it's a pretty good mix of guys in this offense. But I think trying to predict how it's going to shake out is going to be nearly impossible, at least not until we get, at a minimum, another, through the preseason, and we can see how the team really goes about deploying the guys on the field, because all of them, had a role in game one, but, it's early still. And I think it's too soon to be planting a flag in the ground when it's so up in the air. Now at wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 5 now on Keep Trade Cut, so he has jumped up a few spots this offseason, and 13th overall. Travis Hunter, the number 2 overall pick, is wide receiver 16 and number 42 overall. Danny Brown, wide receiver 96. Parker Washington, wide receiver 113. And then at tight end, Brenton Strange, tight end 19 and number 139 overall. So a couple really nice weapons here. Brian Thomas Jr., obviously a stud. Travis Hunter, drafted to be great. And Brenton Strange, I think, is going to have some nice value at tight end. He is a player that I'm expecting a big season from, or at least bigger than what his current value and rank is. I think he could absolutely be a top 12 tight end. And that this offense, presuming Trevor Lawrence stays healthy, can be a very good offense. You look at these receivers, Brian Thomas Jr., the community clearly is high on him as the wide receiver 5. I don't have him quite that high. I would not have him above Puka Nacua in Dynasty. I think it's a toss-up with some other guys a little bit lower down the board. I think you can make an argument maybe against Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I'd probably still take St. Brown and Puka over Brian Thomas in Dynasty. And I think he would slide in maybe after those players. But to me, Brian Thomas is more in the Drake London conversation, I think, than the Puka, CeeDee Lamb, St. Brown, like that type of range. And I think the emergence of Travis Hunter is likely going to, I don't want to say it's going to hurt Brian Thomas Jr., but it might slightly lower the ceiling. I would fully expect Brian Thomas Jr. to still be great. But Travis Hunter looks good so far. In their first preseason game, he played on offense with the starters. He did not play on defense with the starters. It is clearly an offense-first situation for Hunter, and I'm expecting him to be in the slot, get a lot of slot targets. It seems like the coaches are probably going to play him. So in the first preseason game, he had about, I think it was 62% of his snaps came from the slot. And if he is anywhere in that 50 to 60% slot range, he's going to be a big-time favorite target for Trevor Lawrence, who loves throwing to the slot. So we all remember a few years ago when Christian Kirk came out of nowhere, had a big season. He was playing in the slot. And so Trevor Lawrence now has a much younger, more athletic, explosive, great separator in Travis Hunter playing in the slot. And I think it's going to end up being a pretty solid workload for Hunter, because I would imagine he's going to get a lot of targets or plays that are drawn up for him. So he might not be on the field for 99% of snaps like Brian Thomas will be, but he's going to get looked at more when he is in the game, in my opinion. And so I think you have to take that into consideration. If you are a big-time Travis Hunter guy it's probably going to ding your view on Brian Thomas. And so that's why, to me, Hunter, I think, has a chance to be really, really special. And while Brian Thomas Jr. already has showed he's great, that was last year with basically nobody else to throw the ball to. And a lot of his success did come in the second half of the season with Mac Jones and not Trevor Lawrence. So we still need to see those two play together and show that they're going to be on the same page to the way that Thomas was with Jones. So hopefully shouldn't be much of a worry, but still, you never know until you see it. I'm not that interested in Brown or Washington. If you want to stash, one or both on your bench, I think that's perfectly fine. I think they're going to get some targets. Parker Washington finally showed some flashes to where if he gets some time in the slot, if Travis Hunter needs a break or suffers some sort of injury, I think Parker Washington steps into a nice role. And then Brown is probably going to be your other starting outside receiver. So for a wide receiver 96 price tag, you could probably do worse. So I would say he's at least worth rostering. And we already talked about Brenton Strange, and then I'm excited about him and his potential in this offense to be a solid number 3 target. All right, so let's move on now to the Tennessee Titans. And, well, actually, before we do it, I want to make another comment here about Trevor Lawrence. So I don't think we talked enough about him, but he's a player that I think is, obviously this is going to be a huge year for him. He just signed a big contract. Expectations are high. He got injured last year, has been relatively mediocre throughout his career. I mean, he hasn't been terrible, but he certainly hasn't lived up to the hype as, number 1 overall pick, best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, that kind of stuff. He's been an average NFL starter. And, maybe to be nice, we say a little bit above average. But certainly I think we're all expecting and hoping for more. And it's time to go. New head coach is in there. It's an offensive-minded head coach with Liam Cohen. And I'm fully expecting this offense to take another step. Hopefully Lawrence can stay healthy all year long. He's got the weapons now. He's got even though it's a mix of guys in the backfield, he's got a complete backfield between the 3 running backs. He's got good wide receivers. Fingers crossed, I'm very bullish on Lawrence for this year. I have him in a ton of leagues, so it would be really awesome if he could come through. And I am excited about the potential in this offense in 2025. All right, so now let's move on to the Tennessee Titans, who had the number 1 overall pick. Pretty rough season last year, of course, with Will Levis, who is now on injured reserve. He's out for the season, so he will not be at quarterback, but instead it will be number 1 overall pick Cam Ward, who is the QB 14 and number 47 overall player on Keep Tread Cut. And he is joined in the backfield by Tony Pollard, who is RB 40 and 158 overall. Tajay Spears, RB 39, 156 overall. And then Khalil Mullings, rookie out of Michigan, RB 91. In terms of his receivers, Calvin Ridley is the clear number 1. He's the wide receiver 50 and 136 overall. I think he's being undervalued. I get that he's older, but he's the clear number 1 receiver on a team that's probably going to have to throw the ball a lot and is going to want to, get Cam Ward that passing experience on what is probably going to be more of a developmental year. He's joined by Tyler Lockett, who's wide receiver 120 and probably in the final year of his career. Van Jefferson is the wide receiver 169 and is currently listed as a starter. And then Alec Ayomanor, rookie, 76th overall at the position, 216 overall. Chimere DK is another rookie, and he is wide receiver 102 and 295 overall on Keep Tread Cut. So in terms of the wide receivers, there is certainly room for one of those 2 rookies to take over a starting spot by the end of the season and potentially solidify themselves as, a long-term piece of the offense. They're both, mid-round guys, so I'm not expecting a ton, but certainly keep those 2 in mind as potential sleepers. Chig Okonkwo there at tight end, Gunnar Helm, and, so I think that Chig Okonkwo is actually a really nice value because I don't think Gunnar Helm is going to do a ton as a rookie. but it's going to be Calvin Ridley and Chig. Those are going to be the two guys in the passing game that I think are the anchors for Cam Ward. And then Tony Pollard, I think, is a really nice value at RB40. He's a great value in redraft, but he's going to be a really solid player. The injury news over the weekend for Tajay Spears was not good. It looks like he's going to miss all of the preseason. That could spill over into the NFL regular season as well. And that's going to open a door for Tony Pollard to have a huge workload to start the season. I would imagine that Pollard is probably not going to get a whole lot of additional playing time now this preseason due to the injury to Spears. And that, of course, opens the door for Khalil Mullings, who was a late-round pick for Tennessee and is somebody that was more of a power back, a grinder in college at Michigan. He's not exactly, one of those speedsters. He's not a big weapon in the passing game. He's a former linebacker that got turned into a running back, so certainly a physical runner, and could end up stealing some goal line carries potentially, but things are this was going to be a big year for Tajay Spears, and now things are looking a bit rough, I would say, for his future, because he's not been able to beat out Tony Pollard, and now he's hurt, and it's just one of those things where he fell in the draft a bit because of potential injury issues and kind of a degenerative knee problem, and it's hard to say when that's going to pop up or whatnot, but it seems that injuries could impact his future. And Tony Pollard has shown that he is a reliable guy. He was startable last year, and I think he'll be startable again this year, and he's certainly going to have better quarterback play, even if Cam Ward has a lot of rookie mistakes. It can't be that much worse than Will Levis was a year ago. So I am interested in seeing how the team progresses. I think it's going to be, a struggle for the team as a whole, but some interesting pieces, and you should be able to get some fantasy value across, each position here. So Calvin Ridley, I think, definitely the guy in redraft that I would be after, but Tony Pollard right behind him, and Cam Ward, certainly from a dynasty perspective, is exciting, and will be interesting to see how he can do as a rookie, because if he shows that he can run the ball, even to the tune of a few hundred yards per year, that's going to really help his floor. And if they can get him a good receiver in the draft next year, it just makes him a general improvements, but you obviously can't be trotting out a million-year-old Tyler Lockett and Van Jefferson as, starting wide receivers and expect to do a whole lot. So they're going to need to add somebody next year to go with Calvin Ridley. But the future could be very bright for Tennessee if things can work out for Cam Ward. All right, so now it's the time of the episode to go through my buy, sell, sleeper, and breakout for the division as a whole. And we're going to start with the buy. And there's actually a lot of players that I think could fall into this category. We've talked about a number of the guys that I like, and I had a tough time picking one because I think there's at least a guy on every team that I think is a bit undervalued right now. But for Dynasty, I'm going to go with tight end Brenton Strange from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think there is a real possibility that he is, the number 3 target on what should be a pretty good offense. And given the landscape at the tight end position, he could very much be a top 12 guy. And he's not being valued anything close to that. In Dynasty, he's at tight end 19. Redraft, he's pretty far down the board as well. So I think that there's a lot of potential there. I always like to find a late round tight end every year and dig into that. And it works out pretty well a lot of the time, because once you get past the first few players, everyone's kind of the same. Once you get past this year, at least from a redraft perspective, I think you have your obvious studs. But then once you get past like TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, it's into this situation where you're talking about Evan Engram and David Njoku and, whoever the Steelers guy is going to be, Tucker Kraft and Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid. Like, there's all these players that probably, they could all be good. And one of them probably will be pretty solid. But is it going to shock anyone if Brenton Strange ends up in that group in terms of their fantasy scoring at the end of the year? It's not going to surprise me if he ends up somewhere in that 8 to 12 range. Absolutely could be a possibility. And so if Lawrence stays healthy, we saw Strange have a couple nice games last year, and he was a second-round pick a few years ago. So it's not like this is some guy that was a seventh-round pick that was only on the field because Evan Ingram got hurt and he had to play. He was getting a little bit of playing time, and then the injury, of course, opened up the opportunity. And now, as a third-year player, this is prime time for a young tight end to break out. Now, my sell is also going to come from the Jaguars, and it's going to be Brian Thomas Jr. So, by putting Brian Thomas Jr. on my sell list, this is not me saying I think he's going to be bad. This is me saying I do not think he is the wide receiver 5 in Dynasty. I mentioned earlier that there are a number of players that are now listed after him that I would prefer. If you can trade Brian Thomas Jr. and get Puka Nacua, or you can get St. Brown plus, or you can get, even if you can get Ladd McConkey plus for Brian Thomas, I think there's a big enough gap between the two players that you might be able to get McConkey in a first for Brian Thomas Jr. And I would prefer the McConkey in a first side. I think you can get Drake London plus for Brian Thomas, and I would probably prefer that side as well. So there are names that I would rather have, and particularly, so this is, again, more of a dynasty sell, and we talked about the effect that Travis Hunter could have on Brian Thomas, but in redraft especially, I would absolutely be fading Brian Thomas because there's a lot of questions. We don't know exactly what the impact is going to be with Hunter. We don't know exactly what the chemistry is going to be with Trevor Lawrence. It's a new offensive system, so we assume that Brian Thomas is going to be very good because he was awesome last year. And is he a top 10 dynasty wide receiver? Yes, absolutely. But there's enough other players that I like a lot that I'm willing to go elsewhere. In redraft, I would rather have Nico Collins, and a number of these other players that we mentioned. I'd rather have Drake London straight up in redraft. So I think you can get a ton for Brian Thomas Jr. And, you could really, really help your dynasty team. And you could even use him to go up and get a Jamar Chase, go get a Malik Neighbors, somebody in that echelon, a Justin Jefferson. I think you could absolutely get something done given the injury issues that he has had so far in August. So, hey, if you can package Brian Thomas and a pick or some other player and get Jamar Chase, I think that's a great opportunity to land, the best wide receiver in the game, something like that. So you never know what's possible until you go out and see what you can get done. So if you are excited about Travis Hunter and you're a little bit nervous about the connection there with Lawrence, put him on the trade block, see what you can get. You're probably going to be able to get a ton for him, given that he is listed as the wide receiver 5 on Keep Trade Cut. All right, now my sleeper for the division is going to be Woody Marks. So he was one of the first players we talked about today. I think there's a lot of potential for him in that Houston offense, both in the passing game on third downs, the injury issues for Joe Mixon and for Nick Chubb, who sounds like has been a bit slow to bounce back. So I don't know that Woody Marks is going to be some RB1 or even an RB2, but is he going to have a few weeks during the season where he is startable or you can flex, or at least show enough potential that you think, hey, this guy's going to be in a committee for the rest of the season and he's going to get you some points and his value is going to increase? I think that could be Woody Marks. So if he's on your waiver wire, I would definitely go check, make sure you add him. I would definitely prefer him to Dameon Pierce. I'd prefer him to Nick Chubb. And he was probably a 4th-round pick in your rookie drafts, but doesn't hurt to go take a look and just confirm that he was in fact drafted and that he is on a roster, because he is my sleeper for the AFC South. My breakout pick for the division is going to be Josh Downs. So Indianapolis Colts wide receiver, and he is someone that I thought did a lot of nice things last year, and he really needs the quarterback position to simply be better from a passing perspective. If it's Daniel Jones, then Josh Downs, I think, is in line to be a top 24 wide receiver and be very productive for fantasy. If it's Anthony Richardson, ignore this pick entirely because I think it's going to be more of the same if it's Anthony Richardson. But if it is Daniel Jones and he stays healthy, then I think Josh Downs is in line for a really nice season. I think he's going to be peppered with targets. Daniel Jones is coming from a place in New York where he was giving Wan'Dale Robinson just these insane high target games. Josh Downs is a much better player than Wan'Dale Robinson. He's more talented. And if he can get that same type of target volume, we could be looking at a really, really nice season for Josh Downs. All right, and now to wrap up today's show, we're going to finish off with some division predictions for the standings. And this is a division to me that is very much up for grabs. It's not going to shock me whatever the order ends up being. I think all four teams have a legitimate chance to win this division. I'd be a bit mildly surprised if Tennessee were to come out on top, but I think there are some pretty significant negatives for all four teams involved. And so I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars as the division winners. I'm going to assume health for Trevor Lawrence, a nice rookie season for Travis Hunter, just continued success for that group, and the offensive system takes hold and provides us some nice fantasy value. And I think that they will come in first place. I do think that Houston will finish in second. I'm a bit worried about the offensive line, but I think that there is enough talent between Stroud and the receivers to, keep them alive. And the defense should be very solid for the Texans. So I have them in second. I have the Indianapolis Colts in third. This really comes down to the quarterback situation. Regardless of who it is, I think they're going to be okay. They have some pieces, but I don't see how they completely fall off unless, there's an injury to both quarterbacks. I think they're both decent enough that they're going to be able to stay out of the bottom of the division. But they're not going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. I think they're probably more of a 7 or 8 win team. And Tennessee then coming up in last. A nice rebuilding season here for the Titans. Get Cam Ward some experience. I'm sure he'll have some nice moments and build some momentum for next year when hopefully they can get them another receiver and build that thing moving forward. So there you have it. There is the full AFC South breakdown with our buys, sells, sleepers, and breakouts. We talked about a number of different values for the division, and I got you some predictions there as well. So thank you all very much for tuning in. We'll be back with the final 2 AFC divisions over the next couple weeks. So we have the AFC East and the AFC West, and we might even have a 2-episode week at some point this month, given the nature of the schedule, us missing a show back in July. And so we'll try to get those divisions in. That way we can do a My Guys show and some preseason award predictions, that sort of thing, and talk about kind of the preseason as a whole as we gear up for the regular season. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all next week in a new episode. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and you have been listening to the Dynasty War Room Podcast.